I'm welcoming Professor Joseph Chandrakanthan, our guest in the Newman Institute in Uppsala. Great to have you here. You are based in Canada for many years now, but formerly you have been professor at the University of Jaffna in the northern part, Tamil-speaking part of Sri Lanka. What made you come to Montreal? This might be my first question.
I've been studying in Canada, in fact, and then after the year 1995, when the entire population in Jaffna got displaced, in the sense that there was a big exodus, we had to move over 40 miles right into the south. So I walked with the people, and then almost 500,000 population was there. And with that, I came to Colombo, and then ended up in Montreal. So the Jesuits were good to me, and they gave me teaching position at Loyola College, which is part of the University of. Which part of Concordia University in Montreal. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that's great. Sri Lanka has been in the press for many years because of the war between the Tamil Tigers and the Sri Lanka forces that are dominated by Sinhala forces. Now we had 10 years of peace, or at least it seemed to be peaceful. Now with the bombings on Easter, the war is back as it appears now. What was your reaction on these attacks?
Initially, it was very hard to determine as to what prompted it, what caused it, for the simple reason that it was directed towards Tamils. It was obvious in one reason, and also it was directed towards the large international community, because 3 major hotels were bombed at the same time, almost with 5 or 6 minute difference. But 3 churches that were targeted were having Tamil worship, and worship in Tamil, in Catholic worship in Tamil, and also I found that they were targeted because they were Tamils and they were Catholics.
So you believe this aspect has been underestimated by the international press, that this was targeted against Tamil Christians in particular?
I tend to have that conclusion because looking at the very empirical reality, it reveals itself that it was targeted against Tamils, it was targeted specifically against Tamil Catholics. So there is an element of ethnicity and also an element of religion involved in it.
Do you find this could be a starting point of a new kind of conflict erupting between the Sri Lanka forces and the Tamil population?
It's very hard to determine at this point, but I do realize as a student of political science as well, I would say, because I've been teaching mostly social justice issues related to religion, and my personal feeling is that the government to some extent had been involved in it because of the fact that many warnings were given initially. I do know personally that more than 10 years ago it was said that radical violent elements within the Islamic community are being nurtured with the support of the government, who had been arming them. So why was it done? And realizing the fact that these radical elements were also located within the Tamil regions in eastern part of Sri Lanka, and also within the southwest. They were dotted with communities, Muslim communities in the Catholic areas, and specifically Tamil Catholic areas, and therefore there seems to be some sinister motive behind it, of closing one's eye, as we would say, or turning a blind eye to reality. And those things have come to the surface in various other forms when the Prime Minister and President were shifting blames. We do not know as to what these things are happening, or India would insist and say, we informed even 2 hours before the event. Or they would say that there were certain people who were aware of it, some of the Buddhist communities and also ministers, their parents, they were aware of it, that they should not go out on Easter Sunday morning. So all these seem to indicate rather a confusing reality for a normal observer.
But at the same time, it is very interesting that the president himself participated in the service one Sunday afterwards, and he also suggested to the cardinal to get the Nobel Prize.
Certainly, yes. Unfortunately, the church and politics have been having, at higher levels, a kind of relationship which I find it rather hard to understand. Here we have a cardinal who is Sinhalese, but at the same time a person who did not come out quite openly when more than 80,000 Tamils were simply slaughtered on the 19th of May in 2009. And then there were several other incidents in which specifically Tamil children, Tamil women, Tamil men were targeted, unarmed people. And
so you're not talking about the events in 2009 now?
Yeah, that's right. 2009 and previous to that, and post-war situation also. And therefore, to find that he being nominated for Nobel Prize, I did see that. However, Tamil Catholics feel differently, I would say, because they feel they were forgotten. They were not. Many things were overlooked, and all of a sudden, Tamil Catholics in his own diocese it happened, and I would realize that when he said, for example, my church. My church is bombed, my people are bombed, and so on, which was a personal kind of ownership. But at the same time, being a spiritual leader of the entire country, I think many Tamils have written, they have mentioned, they have stated in public that there were Tamils killed previous to this also. So why was the Cardinal so silent about it?
How is the situation overall developing in Sri Lanka? Is there kind of improvements concerning human rights records, concerning peace, concerning reconciliation over the last 10 years?
It depends on how one sees the reality in its holistic perspective. There is more fear, there is less personal freedom, but at the same time there is less threat, I would say. I've been to the country several times after the war, and the kind of freedom that they exercise between the people of the south and people of the north, there's a big difference. I am from the north, but I would feel far more comfortable as a Tamil in the south at a time when I could merge with the people, and also the international presence is there in Colombo, therefore one feels more secure. But that is being under threat and question now, where Tamil institutions, Tamil churches, Tamil schools, Tamil convents, they are living in an unidentified form of fear, and perhaps a form of guilt that just because I am a Tamil, I am a Catholic, my life is in a very awkward position, in the sense of my life is under threat.
At the same time, some kind of radicalization is ongoing process within Buddhism. Do you find this threatening?
This has always been there, and people have been foreseeing it. This is where I feel I do not agree with the Cardinal when he said we need to accept primarily that Sri Lanka is a single Buddhist country, by stating that he is denying the whole basis of democracy, because it becomes a demotic state and not a democratic state. In a democracy, religion or any other affinity does not count. But if he says, for example, we have a Buddhocratic state or a theocratic state, where theocracy or Buddhocracy would be the basis of the principle of the state system, it's understandable. Or an ethnocratic state, when he said single Buddhist country, that definition does not fit in with what Sri Lanka claims to be a working democracy, a modern democracy, and for that matter, even the Commonwealth countries once said it's a model democracy, and largely the Tamils and also the Muslims, and the rest of the Eurasians and others will feel threatened. In other words, the non-Buddhist would feel, is it a democracy? I mean, if I am voting for somebody because he's of my ethnicity and my religion, that undermines the whole concept of democracy.
Mm-hmm. How is your perception of the Chinese factor that has become very strong in the last 10 years in Sri Lanka, in terms of military, in terms of investments, in terms of political agreements, also in terms of the Chinese language?
This has been also foreseen the last 15 or 20 years ago, when they said China is growing into be a world power, and this has really happened, and this is a reality, both in economic and political terms, and now it has become also in militaristic and naval terms. And China has been planning it very well, I would say. And here we must look at the strategic location of Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is the last island as far as the southern tip and the northern pyramid of the Indian Ocean is concerned. So he who or she who controls, the one who controls Sri Lanka, certainly has strategic importance in terms of international trade, international marine trade and marine activities. And Indian Ocean is both in the western and eastern side. Had to look at Sri Lanka for various other important strategic needs, and China has foreseen it far ahead of times and had built a very major harbor there, which is though unused at the moment. So Chinese presence, I feel, has come to stay, and it's going to threaten our own democratic, and if at all we call Sri Lanka a democracy, the whole democratic machinery is going to be threatened as well.
So the Chinese factor is almost supporting the kind of, how shall I say, radicalization that is going on in Sri Lanka.
Chinese wouldn't nationally take it as their involvement, but certainly to deny that the Chinese intelligence was unaware of it is the Tamils would seriously doubt that, because Chinese presence, both in numbers, in quantity and quality, had been in Sri Lanka for the last 20 years, and China played an exceptionally major role in escalating the conflict in terms of its arms supplies, in financial support and military advice, and also mercenary presence of Chinese soldiers perhaps. And this has been observed by the Tamils and the non-singular personnel from the other sides. And I'm to some extent I'm doubtful whether if China would claim ignorance of the events that had been snowballing in the country.
Okay, perhaps my last question. How would you see the future of interreligious dialogue in Sri Lanka? Is it going to be disturbed because of these dominating factors that are coming in, radicalization, or do you think it has a great future? Because Sri Lanka is an interesting country because it has the Hindu community, it has the Buddhist community, it has different Christian communities. Do you think they will manage to find a way of going ahead in interreligious dialogue?
From the beginning of the first millennium, Sri Lanka has been a multi-ethnic and multi-religious country, for one reason. Secondly, that multi-ethnic and multi-religious aspect had not been well received and accepted and acknowledged and lived. But today, I would accept with Hans Kuhn, for example, who said there is no world peace without peace among religions, and there is no peace among religions without dialogue among religions. And for me, that has come to stay now, that kind of principled statement, namely all three religions profess, all four religions in fact, profess peace as their core value, whether the Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus and Christians. Unless that peace is somehow brought to the forefront, not only by dialogue, but I feel the time has come for cooperation, for consolidation of our resources to some extent to work for peace, not by mere lip service to peace, but working it out, because we have still, who suffered most in all the last 30 years of conflict? The poorest of the poor. And if you are really concerned about the majority who are seeking peace, the majority are the poor, and the poor are very religious, whether they are Hindus, Buddhists, Muslims or Christians. And therefore we had to bring issues of justice, we had to bring issues of education, we had to bring matters of common concern and work together. I would even personally like if our churches, our institutions be open to other religions, to speak to people. Intellectual dialogue is not going to solve our issues. It has to be a common person's dialogue, because Hindu children, Muslim children, Christian children and Islamic children study together in our schools and colleges. But they study, when it comes to religion, they study separate, they go to separate classes and so on. But this should start from the grassroots. It should be nurtured, it should be brought to fulfillment by activities, by interreligious action and interreligious responsibility. Building that up is more important and equally important as interreligious dialogue. And dialogue should not be an artificial reality of meeting and discussing doctrines, but much more than that. I think it should come down and boil down to the fact of our existential issues, and there should be common cooperation, with a sense of justice. There can be no religion, a religion that predominates, a religion that seeks to dominate, which ultimately ends up in oppressing the other, cannot build peace. Peace is not an order from above. Peace is a reality that we seek and live together as human beings, as called by the supreme reality. And the recognition of that supreme reality to whom we surrender in the Islamic tradition, supreme reality who breathes into us peace in Jesus Christ in the post-resurrectional sense, and the supreme reality which is Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, which is sung at the end of every prayer in Hinduism. And ultimately Buddha himself is an embodiment of peace. I mean, his ultimate wisdom is to find that peace which is undisturbed, which is unperturbed by anything, not merely by desire, but ultimately by nothing. That's what Nibbana meaning, reaching the ultimate emptiness. The kenosis of human reality ultimately is the kenosis of peace, which comes in when everything is empty. So I think we need to seek that and work for it together.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Professor Joseph Chandrakanthan, for coming to the Newman Institute and giving us this wonderful interview for the Signum periodical. Thanks a lot.
Thanks very much.